they'd say, Jim, Jim, Jim.
Well, I'm David Lawrence. I really could talk about Jim all day. It's not an exaggeration. We spent a lot of time with Jim. Kind of like Robbie said a little though, is that he was a lot closer to our families and such, but I didn't know his family side very much. It's kind of a big breakthrough. I did meet the brother and some of his people, but we're way more on the writing side. A lot. So the first part I'm just going to kind of read, and then I have a ton of bullets, and I'll go as long as I feel like I guess I really could go away. But so how did I meet Jim? So my first memories of Jim, watching him hit the jump at the top of the dig in Montesa Park. So that was close to 30 years ago now, which is, oh God, I'm old. It's close to 30 years ago now, and at that point I was a novice rider, especially in the sand. I had a brand new XR 600 4-stroke, which Jim later called big and heavy, which he was right. But that's what I was used to, and I just saw him as a dirt bike god. That guy was like the guy to me. Sand and whoops out there didn't seem to affect him. He was able to, the biggest thing for me was he was able to change gears in the air so that his bike didn't die when he landed at the top. That was just phenomenal to me. So, of course, him being, he was older than me, and he was awesome, and I was like, oh, I can't even talk to this guy. So at that point, he was just the guy that did it. So I remember my brother and I did a desert race probably a year after this time. We saw Jim there, and I was like, whoa, that's that guy, right? That's that guy. So at that point, that's all Jim was, right? So, but I had met Frank, and Frank Austin, who's not here. But Frank and Jim lived together at that time on the northeast side. So I'd met Frank at the first desert race I ever went to. And so I went over to see Frank at his house, and that guy was his roommate. Wow, okay, that guy. So I'll never forget walking into their house, and Frank being Frank, he had an entire engine apart in the living room of their house.
I remember that.
Yeah, that house was crazy. There were stacks of dirt bike magazines and parts, and Jim had, I think, 2 full arcade games in that house. And it was a great place to hang out, because I had a wife and everything had to be nice in their house. It was wow. But yeah, I met Jim there, and then he became, a guy instead of a god to me. And so I started getting more serious about riding, and he was like always at Montesa Park. So we became friends that way. I don't really remember exactly how progression went in the early years, because I was with Frank a lot doing desert racing. But I know Jim did some desert racing. He never cared for it nearly like he did motocross. I mean, the thing about Jim, one thing I miss even now, is that he wanted to ride anywhere, anytime, anything. It really didn't matter. He just loved being out there. He loved being, out there. That's all he did. He just loved being out in the nice, hot, cold, whatever it was. There was Jim. He always had a riding partner. So he could spend hours on end racing hole shots against people. That was his deal. I mean, he didn't care what he was lining up against, who he was lining up against. He would do it over and over and over. And that's, who could get the fastest up the hill. His equipment might not be the best. He didn't care. He was in for the game. So, and even though, and I definitely want to say this, he was the most self-deprecating person that I've ever met. But you get him on a bike, and he wasn't an a-hole, but he wouldn't give an inch. I mean, he was trying his hardest all the time. And, first he'd just kill me, but when we got better, it was a battle. It was a fun battle with Jim. So after that introduction, there's a lot of highlights, and I'll just scratch the surface. But we went to Glamis a lot of times. Glamis, California is huge sand dunes.
Is that Glamis there?
Yeah, all these pictures are I sent in for Glamis, and I have literally like 1,000 pictures, but Jim took most of them, so he's not in them. So these my wife must have taken because he was the picture guy. So some of the things I remember from those trips are just campfire ventilation sessions. So every night was just about as good as the day because we talked about everything that happened all day. on and on and on. I remember one specific story was Frank and Jim messed with his big old 12 paddle KX500 out there for a day and a half, trying to figure out how to jet the thing. It would run great and it would run crappy. Tell the story because it's just psycho. There was a tiny piece of cellophane in the carburetor that would block the little jet. But he didn't get to ride with us for like a day and a half, so he made up for it once we fixed it. But it's also a story of this self-deprecating type Jim. He way out in the middle of nowhere in the 500 and it broke down. Me being tall and stronger and a little younger than him, I said, you know what, you're having a hard time wrestling this thing. Let me take, I wouldn't want to put you out. I wouldn't want to put you out. Jim was always saying that. Finally, I let him ride my bike and we pulled with the quad. And with my long legs, I was able to get it from way the crap out there in the sand dunes. Oldsmobile Hill is one of these with the big roosters shooting up. He would sit there all day. He didn't care if it was a sand buggy, whatever he was lining, banshees, he would just over and over all day long. That was just his fun thing. Let me make sure I say these things. Let's see. Motocross racing. So, he, like Robbie had said, he had a whole career before I was ever even into it. So, but I do remember him racing. I don't think I ever raced much against him, but he helped me get better all the time. He raced against one of our friends, Chris Curl. I remember there was a huge C-class out of Moriarty. Him and Chris were kind of the cream of the crop at that time. And Jim being Jim, like I said, he wouldn't give an inch on that bike. So Chris thinking he's run the race, and Jim gets him at the last second, and he just cackled over that, just over and over. That was a story for years, how he beat him in the last turn. It was also, one time we were at Sandia motocross track, and at that time I was better than him. He knew it, but he would hold me off, and it helped so much, practice and passing. We crashed, he breaks his collarbone. I run over him, I don't know if I broke his collarbone. But, and he's like, it'll heal. A month later, I think it's okay. You never saw a doctor, you never did any. He's like, it'll be all right. Okay, Jim, it's always that way. Motocross again, he was the VCR king of recording racing. I don't know, whoever went through his house after the incident, they must have found thousands of VCR tapes. I'm not sure he ever got to the DVR, the digital recording, but man. And motocross also, he became the official photographer of my boys as they got better. We literally have thousands of pictures. Most, 80% of them Jim. So we think of them all the time. We have pictures of them all. It's great. Supercross trips, went on lots of those. And I really think he liked the day in the pits as much or more than the actual races. He just loved conversing with all the people and the industry, parts, but most of all was pretty girls. He could not pass up Monster Energy girls. He would get shots. We all had shots with the girls, and it was great. And he was, he wasn't creepy, but he thought, it's just Jim, it's crazy. Vehicles, how can we forget his old Suburban? So he always had that, obviously, in the first days when I met him, in desert racing, he'd sleep in it and eat out of it. I mean, that was his whole world in there. I remember he had a VW Bug that he was real proud of. I also remember when towing it home when it caught on fire. And then I picked him up and I towed it to the repair shop when he needed it fixed. Like we said before, giant storyteller. Wow, we have stories of Coast Guard, politics. Thankfully, we agree on most things, but we could talk for hours on that. My boys remember him most, and this is kind of strange, but golly, that was his. I mean, still, if I say to my boys, they'll say something that's golly. That's Jim. Then another thing he always said was Chula 90. Not really sure what that means, but anything that was fast, they were going Chula 90 over there. Hit that wall. I don't know, he said it all the time. Anybody that was good at racing with a hot shoe, besides from the old dirt track days, I suppose. A couple more. Yeah, so he sold me all the alarm supplies that I needed for my house, my dad's house. He helped me set them up. It's always Johnny on the spot with that. Something else about him, I think it rubbed off on me because I tend to have this, but he always had a coat with him. It could be 110 degrees, and he gave me the big talk once, and I'm like, why do you always, you never know, it may rain, tonight may be freezing, we live in a desert, so it's hot in the day. It's just something I really remember about him, but many barbecues and parties at our house, visits over the years, even became friends with my mom and dad. He took pictures of my brother's wedding, took pictures of my son's wedding. He sat next to my mom at my son's wedding. So he became part of the family, a big part of the family. Yeah, and his stories about the west side of Albuquerque is just something everybody that doesn't know about the old days of Reynolds should hear, because I live on the west side. I mean, it's just an entirely different world. And he lived out there as a young boy, but that's just way out there. And now it's the coolest. It's crazy. But I think most of all, he's just a good friend and a great guy to have around. We always made a get together better if Jim, showed up, came by. Like I said, he's self-deprecating, so people, I don't want to put you out, but when he did show up, it was a great time. And we really miss him, and I actually think of him more than I ever expected. I mean, multiple times a week still. I have a street bike. I have a hard time riding it since then. I've been out a couple times, but it's just made a really big impact on all of us, so we miss him a lot. Thanks.
I'm Dave's brother. We were all kind of friends together. When I sat down to kind of prepare for this, I was thinking, why are you doing this? You don't like speaking in front of people. It makes you nervous, But then I thought, I've attended some funerals, and this is not one of them, of course, but where people didn't really tell about the person. And I left the funeral not knowing any more than I had before. Like how sad, And I wouldn't do that to Jim. He was a good friend. And I realized that it'd be a dishonor to me for me not to tell about the stories that I have and things that he meant to us and my family. And so, bear with me while I try to tell you a little bit about him. He was like a brother to me, an older brother. Riding up on this barge, that was the first time I was in awe. We just started riding. Here's this guy, we'd be in a wheelie across the bottom, hit the face of that thing and jump really high, land, shoot a big rooster off the top, take off and do it again. And it's like, wow, who is this guy? Wow. We finally met him. Oh my God! I remember I was really nervous. That was one of my first races, and I was just really nervous. And he said, don't be nervous. When else can we go out on a ride? And if you break down or crash and get hurt or something, there's somebody to pick you up and take you back. So it's like, you shouldn't be nervous. I'm like, well, that's true. That's good. Yeah, no. So, over the years, we became really good friends. We rode together, we raced together. We went shooting guns, together. We just had a great time. Pistols and rifles and shotguns and shooting clay birds. And it was fun. We played paintball together. He got me into paintball the first time. He was the first person I think I ever shot. But I shot a lot of other people. I think I've been hit everywhere you can be hit with paintball. I played for years after that, and I just loved it. He was always willing to go. We would have fun. We'd go on motorcycle trips, as Dave said, go to Glamis, just miles and miles of sand dunes. He'd go out riding in the day, and in the night, sit around the campfire, tell awesome stories of how close calls and crashes and victories and so forth. He'd tell stories about the Coast Guard, huge storms in the North Atlantic. He even had those pictures that were published in that magazine. I remember seeing them where he leaned out the hatch and took pictures of the front of the ship, and the whole front of the ship was buried in the wave, you know, all those stories that were so foreign to me from the desert brother. And I loved hearing about those things. It was really, really fun. And sometimes at Glamis, a bunch of us, you know, maybe 7 or 8 guys would get on a bike and we'd really, it's not really a game, we just play follow the leader. Go out through these dunes and we follow the leader. And everybody would kind of just embellish and do their own thing and come back and there's a picture I have in my mind of, you know, these pristine dudes with women's fucking teams and they had little ripples on them, you know, and Jim would pick one and, you know, start a power slide, get his, you know, that KX 500, shooting a big old rooster tail in a power slide all crossed up with, you know, his front up, you know, wheelie, because Jim loved wheelies, right? You know, and he would carve an arc on that face, you know, and the sun going down, it's a picture I'll always keep with Jim. That was the funnest time I ever had on the bike. And that's why I can ride, you know, those times. It's just magical. And Jim was a guy who always, as everyone knows, he was in pretty good spirits. And I did remember a time when I managed to get under his skin. So when we arrived in the dunes, I had this habit I developed. You know, when you go over the top of the dune, you come down the other side, you catch a little air. If you get gas, you know, the back tire kicks up a big rooster tail, right? If the guy's behind you, it ends up catching him in the face, right? So I did a couple of dunes like that, and next thing yeah, it was on purpose. It was. And so before the next dune, you know, here comes Jim ripping by me. He drops in front of me and he just loads me down. I had to stop. I was laughing so hard, and then I had to breathe, so I had to take my helmet off because it was full of sand. He got me good. So that was good. We talked about that one that night. So whenever we were on a trip together, or a barbecue, or, you know, or a birthday party, or whatever, we'd talk politics, you know. And I'm not sure if anybody knows this, but Jim was a little conservative. I don't know if you know that. Just a little bit, you know, which suited me fine because I'm pretty conservative too, and he was a Christian, so we always had a ton to talk about. In fact, I became a Christian with, you know, Dave Archibald, was the leader of a college career and all that. That's really where I became a believer, which is pretty cool. And so we talked. So we on the long trips we'd talk for hours, and if we weren't in the same vehicle, you know, we'd be on the radio talking to one another about, you know, something that Rush Limbaugh said, and, you know, something, you know. And Jim, of course, he loved photography, and you can always find pictures that Jim took. There's hundreds of thousands of them, but ones with Jim actually in it, and not so much, as Dave said. So, and we'd walk through the pits. I have that here too, the Monster Energy girls. You'd always take pictures of them. They were more than willing to be, you know, have their pictures taken. So over the years, I picked up a few Jim-isms, and I still use them. I'll go through a few of them. One of them was baloney skins. Yeah, so Jim, I mean, you probably know. So Jim, when he had worn out tires, or somebody was driving on worn out tires, he said, "Man, these are baloney skins. I gotta get some new tires." So it just stuck with me. The Chila 90 or Chula 90 or whatever, he'd always say that in stories. Man, he was going fast. Chila 90. Also cookie duster. So I remember he grew that mustache. And I was talking to him about it. He goes, "Yeah, I thought I had to grow me a cookie duster." And I thought that was the funniest thing. So I'm sure he's not the first person to use it. Blaze was another one. It, you know, is a term he used to describe a big campfire. So at night, if we had leftover wood, you know, we'd been there a few nights, and we had leftover wood, he'd be like, "Man, we're gonna blaze tonight." We're just gonna blaze. And bench racing, of course, that was always fun. And the golly, you know, being a Christian, he didn't cuss much at all. I don't remember him saying something like that, but that served as his exclamation word, you know, golly, that was a big joke. You know, my kids always talk to him, you know, we refer to him as Uncle Jim, and he always enjoyed, talked about him, you know, asked about how they were doing. And he loved watching them grow up, and I appreciate that so much. There's just so many stories I could talk for hours, but I think about him, as Dave said, I think about him a lot more than I thought I would when I heard that he had passed. And every day or two, it's I'll use one of those phrases, those words, and I'll pass by his neighborhood, and as I'm driving by, and I'll remember him, or think about memory of a trip or a party, and I'll jog my memory, and I'll think about it. I just I miss seeing him. I do. And he was always there for the next trip or going windsurfing. I never got to do with him, or knowing that he was there for just an adventure or a hike or something. It's like the world is a little less friendly and a lot less fun without Jim. And I really do miss him.